Today we're going to go over how to emulate my favorite line of handheld systems, the Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance, all using Retroarch. The first thing we're going to need is Retroarch. If you don't already have it, just head on over to retroarch.com and click on the download button. Scroll to the very bottom and hit the nightly builds. Stable builds are all good, but nightly builds add in new features, fix some bugs. They might also introduce bugs, so just be aware of that. If you have a version that doesn't really work too well, just kind of go back a version. So click on Windows. You have Windows 64-bit, and then download the Retroarch 7-zip folder right here. Go ahead and get Retroarch open, and we are going to download a couple of Game Boy cores here. So head to the Online Updater, Core Updater, and so for today's video we are going to be focusing on 3 different cores. So first up, for Game Boy, we are going to be focusing on Same Boy. This just recently got added into Retroarch, and it is a very accurate Game Boy / Game Boy Color emulator, which is something I really personally strive for. I like accuracy. If you guys have been watching my tutorial videos, you know I strive to have an experience as accurate to the original as I can get. Now for Game Boy Advance, we're going to download GBA. It's maybe not as compatible as the VBAMs, but it's just, again, it's more accurate, and that's, again, huge deal to me. Now, the great thing about both of these emulators is they are both high level, so there are no requirements to have any BIOS files or anything like that. But MGBA does allow you to use a GBA BIOS if you happen to have one. So if you remember from our last tutorial video, we did a tutorial on how to dump your GBA BIOS and games. So if you haven't checked that out, just hit that guy right up there, and you can see the process on how to do that. And guys, I believe in legal emulation here. Stop asking me for ROMs. I'm never going to give them to you. Look at my tutorials on how to dump your own. Otherwise, yeah, I'm not going to tell you how to get games illegally. I'm all about the legal side, so yeah, stop asking. So let's go ahead and try loading up a game. So I'm just going to start with Game Boy Advance for right now. So here's the 2 of the games I dumped last week in our last tutorial. So let's go ahead and try loading up Zelda, and as you can see, it works just fine. It's good to go right off the bat. No extra features needed. Now, if you want to make the experience a lot more authentic, you can use that BIOS file like I mentioned earlier. So in our Retroarch folder, we have our system folder, so go ahead and get that opened up. And then back over here, we're going to go back to retroarch.com. And we're going to go to the docs page for users, core documentation, Nintendo cores, and we're going to scroll down to MGBA. And this gives us our list of what all of our BIOS files need to be listed, need to be named as. There we go. So GBA_BIOS.bin. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my BIOS file I dumped last week. So GBA_BIOS.bin, it's all good to go. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that in my system folder. And done. So let's go ahead and relaunch Retroarch. And now when we load our game, we're greeted by the wonderful Game Boy Advance BIOS screen. Alright, so now let's go ahead and load up our other Game Boy Advance game that I have in this folder here, which is Pokemon Fire Red. So compatibility on MGBA is very good. It's not as good as VBAM, but again, it is much more accurate and is honestly coming quite a long way. It's why I prefer it over VBAM now. If there's a game you run across that doesn't run an MGBA, VBAM is a very, very viable option. It is still really good. I just prefer the way that MGBA is heading, and a bunch of features that are going to be implemented in it that really won't ever be in VBAM. So let's take a look at some of the options that are in MGBA. So you get the game options file. You can set that to be whatever you want, which is really nice. The MGBA does support solar sensor emulation for Boktai, which is something VBAM does not do. So you are able to do that. You could detect what sort of Game Boy you're using. So MGBA does emulate every Game Boy game. It does Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Super Game Boy Borders, and it does them all pretty well. It does Game Boy Advance the best. The only reason I don't use it for my normal Game Boy emulation right now is just kind of a bit of a sound issue. It just has this weird sound bug that I don't really care for. So it sounds decent, but it's not. Yeah, I just prefer using something else just because it does have that slight audio glitch. This is for your BIOS files. You can skip the BIOS if you really don't want it. And then you have the Super Game Boys option as well. If you have a weaker system, you can implement frame skip to help speed things up just a little bit, but honestly, you should be fine. So let's get into shaders, and oh, this is my favorite part about emulating handheld systems on a computer is just some of the things we could do with the shaders. So you go down to handheld and console borders, you can see that there is a preset for Game Boy Advance games. So bam, hit that, and you have a wonderful Game Boy Advance border, and it also simulates the colors that you should see on a Game Boy Advance, as well as some of the motion blur. So that might not be a favorite thing for most of you, but if you're going for authenticity like I like to with these older systems, it's just kind of nice. So I like it, but there's also tons of shader options available, so just go ahead and experiment, and you can find something that you like. If you just like the grid, you can do just the grid. You don't have to do the console border, so you could just load up the grid by itself just like that. That way you get the full screen. Again, depending on your desktop resolution, you will need to choose a different scaling option for your shaders. So for me at 1080p, I like to use the 4x scaler, the 4x scale, just because it gives you a little bit of the system. But if you don't like that as much on 1080p, you can choose the 5x scale that just gives you the outline border of the console screen, so gives it a little bit nicer of a full screen effect. Another thing to keep in mind as well when it comes to the shaders, if you want to see the shader or the console border in a full 16:9 aspect ratio, and go ahead and get the 4x shader loaded back up here. So handheld, console borders. There we go. As you can see, there's clipping on the Game Boy Advance handheld. So to fix that, you just go down to video and you change the aspect ratio to 16:9. And now you have the full Game Boy Advanced handheld on your screen, and it looks freaking awesome. So after you're done customizing and you get everything set up exactly how you like it, make sure that you set up these core overrides. Otherwise, whenever you load up anything, it's just going to load this up, and if you change any of it, it won't be set up properly for your Game Boy Advance stuff. So make sure you save the core override. That way, it just loads all of this right back up as soon as you load it in. All right, now let's try loading up some Game Boy / Game Boy Color games with the Same Boy emulator. So I went ahead and put some of my games I dumped back into this GBA folder. So I have Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening and Pokemon Red. We're going to hold off on showing off some Pokemon Red stuff for a little bit here, and we're just going to boot into Link's Awakening. So as you can see, it just loaded right up into this Game Boy Advance shader that I had preset before. If you like that shader for Game Boy Color games, you're more than able to use it as well. But honestly, if we're loading up some Game Boy Color stuff, we need to make it look the part. So go back into that handheld folder, console borders, and scroll down to the bottom here, and Game Boy Color. There it is. So this is the 5x shader. It kind of crops off the bottom half of the Game Boy, but has that wonderful Game Boy Color border. Once again, if you want to make it so it doesn't clip any of that, you need to come down here and change the aspect ratio to 16:9. That way you can actually see the full extent of the border. And it looks nice. It does look nice. It gives you a pretty decent screen size. But honestly, I like being able to see more of the Game Boy Color screen. So once again, I like to use the 4x shader option. And this is typically how I tend to play my my Game Boy Color games. And once again, just like VBAM, you don't have to have, just like MGBA, you don't have to have a BIOS to play the Game Boy Color games. If you have them, you can put them in the Retroarch system folder by having them listed according to the file name we saw before. But Sameboy has its own emulated version of it that works just fine for me, as you saw. It does the same thing, except that it says Sameboy instead of Game Boy. So I like it. It gives me the little beep, which is what I'm looking for authenticity's sake. More than good enough for my needs. But let's go ahead and take a look at the options now. So there is color corrections on Sameboy, so that way it makes the colors a little bit more accurate to what the real Game Boy Color had. Most emulators don't get colors on Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance right, so this is pretty good at making it a little bit better. It also has accuracy options here, and then you can check what type of Game Boy your games are being played in. So Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance. So if I change this to Game Boy, you will see that A Link to the Past restarts into a Game Boy mode, and it does the black and white screen here. And just like before, make sure that you save a core override once you have everything set up and how you want it. That way, every time you load into a Game Boy game, it will just work properly. Alright, so just to show you the core overrides and the importance of them, let's go ahead and load back up our Game Boy Advance game of Pokemon Fire Red. And as you can see, it is booted right back into that Game Boy Advance menu, and it looked, Game Boy Advance filter, and it looks good. Looks really good. Then we can go ahead and close out of it. And load right back into our Link's Awakening. And it loads right back up into our Game Boy Color border, and it looks freaking fantastic. Now, if you have issues with this happening, if you load back up the Game Boy and it loads into the Game Boy Advance border, make sure you go down to, when you're in your shaders menu, you can hit the Save Core preset as well. That way, everything for this core will load with that. 'Cause sometimes the override doesn't quite do it, but it should. So if that happens to you, just make sure you hit the Save Core preset. That way you can just kind of quick switch between the two. Just like that. Alright, so the last thing I want to show you when it comes to the Game Boy / Game Boy Color emulation is link cable emulation. Say you're playing through Pokemon Red and Blue and you gotta catch them all, but you kind of have to trade between the two. So I'm going to show you exactly how to accomplish that right now. So first thing you're going to do is you're just going to load up any of your Game Boy games. So just load up any of them. I'm just going to load up Zelda in Sameboy here. And as you can see, it loads into our default Sameboy configuration. Looks really nice. So unfortunately, with this link cable emulation, shaders don't work. So go ahead and, the console border shader doesn't work. So just go ahead and kind of just go ahead and turn that one off. So you want to keep your LCD screen effect. We're also going to need to change our video back to core provided, so that way we don't have any weird stretching going on. So now we need to set a directory for our file browser. So It doesn't work if you don't have this file directory set. So go ahead and set it to your folder, just like that. And then you go over here and you click on this load 2-player Game Boy link. So we're gonna load up a copy of Pokemon Red and a copy of Pokemon Yellow. And then we're gonna start the link. Oh, well, dang it. As you can see, it just loaded my defaults again because I wasn't thinking right. Alright, good stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and disable that console border there. And then we need to apply the core provided aspect ratio. There we go. And back in. And so there we go. There's 2 emulated Game Boys. One is running Pokemon Red and one is running Pokemon Yellow. And so you will need 2 controllers to control both, obviously. So I'm going to go ahead and get my second controller plugged in now. So on the Pokemon Red side, I am now pressing start. And then Pokemon Yellow side, I'm now pressing start. So there we go. Bam. As you can see, I am now controlling both games. So obviously, if you have save files already, you're going to be able to load right in and go to the Pokemon Center to initiate trades. I don't have either of my save files in this right now, unfortunately, so I'm not able to show you exactly this running 100%, but I know it works. And there you have it, Game Boy Advanced, Game Boy Color, plus link cable emulation, all within Retroarch. Honestly, Retroarch is becoming such an all-in-one tool. I can't highly recommend it enough to anyone that cares any little bit about emulation. So if you've been scared of trying it just because of the more complicated UI, do try. It's not that bad once you actually get used to it. And again, all the cores that are provided just allow you to have a one-stop emulation setup, and it is just fantastic. So thank you all again so much for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you found it anywhere near informative. And honestly, if you have any questions, always make sure to leave them in the comment section below. Make sure you hit that sub button, like, dislike button, depending how much you like this video. And as always, we will see you all back next video.